Hey all, and welcome back to the Planet Plipcam channel for a Halloween special in Zomplip Studios. I've spent the past month working away in this 10x10 grid area for our Planet Coaster Console Discord competition. I've created a Halloween Scran and Scarezone in Zomplip Studios. I really appreciate you smashing the like button right next to that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, as a month of building is a lot of time to make a 10-minute video. So Halloween is certainly an enchanted or haunted time in the medieval calendar, and I've always wanted to do something in Planet Coaster where I can actually link my builds to history, so that's certainly what I've been doing. I've been researching, reading some books, and watching some YouTube videos to check the history of medieval Halloween. It was a time where the veil between the living and the dead was the thinnest, and the origins themselves are as mysterious as the event itself. I've really tried to create an area of the park which could be a solely medieval area of the park, and then be themed correctly to how it would have been in medieval times, to the Halloween way of life. As nature dies out at this time of the year, the imminent death was waved away by a constantly ringing bell through the night. Throughout the area you can see many lanterns fending off evil spirits, which are a nod to the old punky nights of medieval periods. However, the lighting in the actual area is quite scarce, as in medieval periods, the lighting was very expensive and difficult to obtain. After Halloween, you have All Saints' Day, which is a day which Christianity tried to bring in to make the day and celebrations a bit more holy and sensible. After this praying for the souls of the saints, it was the time for All Souls' Day. This was a time where maybe people in need or people who had died were prayed for, and people would go out onto the streets of villages and towns to go and beg for food. For soul cakes we go, 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. If you haven't got a cake, an apple will do. If you haven't got an apple, give a pear or two. If you haven't got a pear, then God bless you. I do apologise for almost sending you back to school with that history lesson, but I did really want to create a good backstory to this area of the park and show you that I have really thought about what's going into this area. So now I'd like to walk through and show you the different areas of the park and how it's actually going to tie out of the 10x10 grid area, as of course this area would look stupid if it was just a square, so we're definitely planning lots of different things around this area what will still plan into the medieval theme. I've tried to keep down the amount of tacky Halloween decorations with the sequence in mind of how the days carried on and the different kind of themes that we have in medieval times, and I've kind of tried to take it back to how it was more about fending off spirits with light, as that was all they really had to believe in that would fend actual spirits off. So I've removed my scary face from the screen so you can take a look at a better view in Plipcam perspective. As we are just now, you can see some detailed looks at these buildings. There's 2 main buildings in this area of the park, and you will have seen the first building has on it in a custom font, it says Sown, and you would think that it would be pronounced Samhain, Samhain, but it's actually a Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. So I think that was really fitting for this medieval kind of theme that we have going on in this area, and we're going to be taking a look at a closer look at those buildings a little bit later. But moving on to the left hand side, you can see this area. This is like a show inspired by Geekism, and there's lots of things in this area of the park which were inspired by other creators, especially on the good old days on the PC version of Planet Coaster. And I will leave some notes down in the description as to who has actually inspired me for this build. It's really difficult to do this kind of theme in Planet Coaster, so I'm really grateful for those people who have really pioneered the way on the Steam Workshop, who've inspired me. So you can see this stage area, we've got the lights which would shine down. I don't have anyone on the stage at the moment, as it's always difficult to do realistic characters, so that would just be a little show, maybe a bird of prey, they get a bird of prey out or something just like that. To the right hand side we have these spooky skeletons, and then we have the actual horse and carriage as well. They took a long time to build, but I'm really happy with the result and the graveyard that goes underneath. We then have this pretzel stand, which makes it more of a plaza feel, and that's created with loads of the different candy canes and wooden beams as well to theme this cart. Moving on to the left hand side, my proudest thing in the actual area of the park is Mead Mayhem. This is one of those spinning barrel rides, like the teacups, but I didn't want that kind of theme. And in this contest you weren't actually allowed to place flat rides down anyway. So you can see in the centre we've got these barrels of mead, and it's kind of themed. When there isn't Halloween going on in this area of the park, it makes perfect sense for this to be themed just in the way that it is, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I've certainly been inspired by the spinning web kind of barrel ride that they have, I think, at Legoland Windsor. They've got the spider above the ride, which is really cool, so I've certainly been inspired by that and placed a spider at the top, which is perfect theming for Halloween. And you've got all the barrels here, as you can see close up. all of the different panels that I used to make them. I did actually make one version of the barrels which took 2,000 pieces to make just one barrel, but I definitely had to reduce that to some of the smaller beams. You can see here we've got a bit of a centerpiece, and you can see that Halloween jack-o'-lantern has really been faded out by the piece count, which is very annoying, but hey ho, it does look good in that corner, something to look at as a focal point when you're on the ride. Moving on then to a daytime look at this area of the park, I'm really pleased with how it looks at daytime, and I think certainly when the park's mostly open in the daytime anyway, unless this is a Scarezone, the Scran and Scarezone it plays into, it's really going to be open at daytime anyway, so I'm really happy with how it looks, all the textures on this first building that really plays into the shopping plaza, of how you can grab your food and go and sit down in the plaza area. Loads of different wooden corbel beams, big beams, small beams, and then window pieces as walls as well to make a really nice roof just up there. I do like how I've used the log pieces to make the carved roof. I'm really happy with the texture of that. So many pieces to this build, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I've just placed some flags down, something that the park, Zomplip Studios, would just place on this building and really theme it well. And it doesn't need too much. You've got spooky things anyway. You've got things like the stocks around the park, around by the kiddie drop tower, which I've placed in an earlier build in Zomplip Studios, placed in the Hunger Games area, the Katniss Training Academy. But yeah, I'm really happy with how that looks, and it themes really well into how you would be beheaded as well. And then looking at the barrels at daytime a bit more in detail, you can see the padding seating that I'd imagine would be padded, just made with the basic shapes just there. I'm really happy with how the barrels have turned out, especially for the low piece count in comparison to what I was doing earlier on when I started this flat ride. And it was really important for me to try and get some movement into the park, although it can't move. It's got all the things necessary to make it look realistic in the park for the guests to use. It's got the queue line, the rides, how tall you have to be, and then the ride operation booth as well. I do have lights going around the exterior of the ride, which is nice to see at night time. However, I have not had the time yet to actually trigger them off in the daytime. I think that's something that you can do, but it's something I'll look at in the future to make it a bit more realistic. You've got the spider, of course, hanging on the top of the web, and then we've got the mead all joining in the middle. We do have what could be grapes in the middle, which isn't mead, but it's just how it goes in Planet Coaster. We've got the pieces to make this work, and I think it does, you know, it pulls it off well enough. You've got lights sunk down into the floor for the entranceway. The sign itself, it's not too flashy itself. I do like how subtle it is. And then moving on to the outside of that ride, where you can see the pretzel stand, we've got the different banners and flags representing the actual area in these medieval times, and then these horses made with loads of different bones from the spooky pack, and they've worked really nicely to make these kind of gothic animals, which are obviously dead, and they're pulling this dead guy as well, who's a skeleton sat on that cart. Then moving on to probably my proudest building in the park, you can see at the lower level of this is all custom with the bricks, with the adventure pieces. They're like the ears for the little statues, I think. So yeah, really happy with how that's worked out. That took a very long time to make this building. Around the back, it's very realistic to how it would be. You don't need the high budget theming, and then perfectly themed, I think, all the way around the outside, with all the different pieces that are just from Western, Spooky Pack. And that's the brilliant thing. All the DLCs for this kind of area have really helped me because they all intertwine very nicely. So looking at where this is in relation to the rest of Zomplip Studios, you can see that it seems miles and miles away, but I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and I'm sure we can get guest flow over there with the piece count that we've got. We've got 40% left, and I'm confident that we'll have enough percentage, as at the end of the day, a car park usually takes up half of the space of an actual park. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Zomplip Studios. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. Smash that like button if you have. Subscribe to the Planet Plipcam channel if you are new around here. Thank you so much for that, and I will see you in the next one.